Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for.
I want to start, though, with the biggest game on the slate, top 10 matchup. You know it was a big game because ESPN prioritized it. It was the lead-in to their NFL playoff coverage. It was Alabama at Kentucky, top 10 matchup at Rupp Arena. And I think we kind of know what was at stake for both teams. Certainly, there was probably more at stake for Alabama. Alabama coming off that loss to Ole Miss on Tuesday. But for Kentucky, listen, the vibes are good. The vibes are high. You're a top 10 team. You're exceeding most people's expectations. Not Torres's, but most of them. But you're coming off two back-to-back wins over top 15 teams. Guess what? Welcome to life at the SEC where you beat two top 15 teams. Now you got a top 5 team coming to Rupp Arena. Alabama does, in fact, get the win 102-97 in another classic SEC basketball game. Alabama gets the win. I think we got to discuss it from both angles. A lot of positives for Alabama, some negatives for Kentucky, but I think we're also maybe accentuating the negatives. So let's go ahead and dive in. And I think really more than anything, this game was an unbelievable showcase for the SEC and basketball, specifically the Southeastern Conference. SEC basketball has arrived, baby. Okay, so in terms of the game itself, listen, to me, what this game speaks to from the Alabama side, it is resilience. It is, listen, all those dumb cliches that feel like cliches, I do think they're kind of true in this case, right? Alabama now has emerged into one of the best programs in all of college basketball. I think Nate Oates is right up there among the best coaches. And when you are a great program, you come into every year with high expectations. You come into every year believing that you are capable of competing at the highest level. And for Alabama, really everything was lining up for exactly that coming into this week. Then you lose to Ole Miss. You're at home. Real questions emerge. We talked about it on Wednesday morning show. 21 turnovers for Alabama and 20 made field goals against Ole Miss. That ain't going to get it done against anybody. Now, part of it is that Ole Miss is a very, very, very good defensive team, but it doesn't change the fact if you lose to Kentucky, now all of a sudden you're 3-2 in league play. Auburn is obviously rolling, a couple other teams at the top of the league. You can't lose games early in this league because it doesn't get easier. And so Alabama's a team, veteran guys, a lot of people back from that Final Four team a year ago. They knew they needed to go in and get a win, saw Nate Oates after the game reference, hey, I don't care how it happens. We have to win this game. Alabama does get the victory. From the Alabama side of things, I think a couple big stories emerged. Obviously, the play of Grant Nelson. That's right, the legend of Devil's Lake, North Dakota. I remember talking about that when he committed to Alabama 2 summers ago. He was unbelievable in this game. And I think more importantly, he was unbelievable early. Because if you watch this game was like a heavyweight prize fighter. I said this, and I truly believe it. The first 8 or 9 minutes of this game was about as intense as any college basketball game I can ever remember. Even that Kentucky-Florida game a few weeks ago, there were ebbs and flows, runs and everything. This game was each team, big shots, back and forth. Kentucky makes a huge shot. The crowd goes crazy. Alabama hits a big shot. The crowd goes quiet. That's how it was the entire game. But that first 10 minutes, it just felt unbelievable. But really, as Alabama, kind of extended the lead late in the first half, early in the second, it was Grant Nelson. I think Alabama fans, I don't want to speak for Alabama fans, but it feels like there's kind of a love-hate relationship with him. At his best, he is incredible. They don't go to that Final Four without him. Remember him against North Carolina in the Sweet 16. Remember, he was really the one guy that played really well against UConn in the Final Four. But he's also kind of had those down games. How does he fit with Cliff Omoyori, with all the guys that you've brought in? Well, he was phenomenal on Saturday afternoon. 24 points in this game, a couple three-pointers. And again, he just made big play after big play after big play. Should mention, by the way, as you can see on your screen, if you are a Bama fan, make sure you're following our Bama page on Twitter, Torres on Bama, for all things late breaking with Alabama. So Grant Nelson was awesome. Mark Sears, we talked about this throughout the last week or so. Finally starting to play like that All-American that we felt like in the preseason he could be. Remember, this was the preseason SEC Player of the Year. It wasn't whoever you think is great in the SEC. There's so many great players. Wasn't Lamont Butler or Jackson Robinson or Otega Owe. Wasn't Walter Clayton at Florida. Wasn't even Jedi Brew. It was Mark Sears. Well, he finishes this game with 24. And I think to me, the big picture takeaway from Alabama, I really feel like you could say that every single person that stepped on that floor contributed to victory and made important contributions in that win. You go through, you look, not just, I don't want to say look at the box score because that insinuates that I didn't watch the game. But if you watch the game, you could see everybody had a role. Mo Diabate, who's kind of this energy rebounding guy off the bench, he was phenomenal, getting boards, throwing bows. There was a big offensive or a foul when he went over the back. And Jay Billis said, I don't think Nate Oates is mad at that foul call because it means he's playing really hard. So he played well. LeBaron Philon, the true freshman, was phenomenal. And really the big picture takeaway for me from Alabama is that is just a darn good team. You can't lose 2 in a row. It's almost like a big NFL team, right? Where you know you're good and you just lost a weird game and you know you can't make it 2 in a row. Alabama does not allow that to happen. Alabama's in really good shape. From the Kentucky side of things, listen, I think there's some positives. I think there are some negatives as well. But I also think the negatives are being maybe a little bit overly accentuated coming off of this loss, okay? Because when I look at this game, a couple things stand out from the Kentucky side. First of all, the offense is now consistently excellent, okay? And I think there were ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys where maybe that offense was not excellent at different points throughout the season. Struggled against Ohio State, struggled against Georgia. But the last 3 or 4 games, I think you're playing really well at an offensive level, even though you quote unquote only scored 81 against A&M. A&M's an elite defensive team that wants to slow things down and make things ugly, and you still put up 81 points in that game. And so if you're looking for positives, listen, the reality is that everyone in college basketball is taking losses this year, except maybe Auburn, who just may never lose again for the rest of the season. But if you're a Kentucky fan, I don't think there's a lot of negatives, and I think in some ways there's many positives. I know that I have been hesitant to say that Otega Owe has been consistently awesome. Remember, I've said all year, I think Lamont Butler brings it every night. Otega Owe in those losses has scored a lot of points. Well, sometimes he hasn't always been consistent. Saturday, he was awesome even in a loss, 21 points, 8 of 14 shooting from the field. And I think he is emerging as a legitimate star. And I think Kentucky fans are already accepting, hey, this kid's better than we thought. We might lose him to the NBA after this year, and that's okay because it shows how good he has been. So Otega Owe plays well. Jackson Robinson, it wasn't his best game, but I don't think he played terrible. Lamont Butler, by the way, who's playing through roughly 1 million injuries. I mean, he is just a walking injury chart right now. Elbows, he's like basically head, shoulders, knees, and toes. He's like Mr. Potato Head. It keeps falling off and a new injury occurs, but he's playing through it. 17 points, 8 assists, 2 blocks in this game. And listen, I think there's a positive and a negative from the Kentucky side. The positive is you score 97 points. The negative is that you lose. And so when you look at this game, listen, I think there's going to be Kentucky fans, and I've seen media too, we're worried about the defense. And yes, I get that you don't want to give up 102 points in a perfect world. And I get also that Kentucky on the season is giving up 86 points per game in league play. And so, yes, it is a concern. 86 points per game is not good, but here's the counter to that. The numbers are kind of skewed when you play 2 of the 10 best offensive teams in the country. Alabama's the number 1 ranked scoring offense in college basketball. They average 90 points per game. Florida, who you gave up 100 points to at home, is one of the best offensive teams in the country. They average well over 85 points per game. And so, yes, are you worried a little bit that Alabama walked into Rupp Arena and put up 102 points? Yeah, I'd be a little bit worried, but here's the counter to that. You know who else Alabama has put up big points against? Basically everyone, okay? Put up 100 against Illinois, 95 against Rutgers, 94 at Carolina, 107 at home to open SEC play against Oklahoma, 94 against Texas A&M a few days ago. So we could sit there and pick apart the Kentucky defensive effort. I don't think the effort wasn't there. I just think that at a certain point, we have to acknowledge that great players make big shots in big moments. And both of these teams have a lot of really, really, really good basketball players. So from the Kentucky side of things, listen, you don't want to dismiss this as only a loss. You do need to be better defensively, especially since we know that you have individually elite defenders in Otega Owe and Lamont Butler. Amari Williams can get there. But at the same time, it's just hard for me to just, oh my goodness, this is the biggest concern that's ever existed. Well, you gave up under 70 to Georgia. You gave up under 70 to A&M. I think the defense is okay. I wouldn't call it A++, but I think part of it is we also have to acknowledge that these are awesome, awesome offensive teams that you're going up against as well. Lastly on this game, just really quick, I think it's a showcase for the SEC. Listen, I know people don't believe it, especially Purdue fans. Shout out Purdue fans. Don't believe that I'm truly unbiased. But listen, the basketball in this league just looks different. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at the out-of-conference resumes of these teams. I just mentioned Alabama beat Illinois, Houston, at North Carolina, whatever, in the out-of-conference. Kentucky beat Duke, Gonzaga, on and on and on. All these teams have really good teams and really good resumes. And I just think this is such a showcase for this sport of college basketball. Listen, at a certain point later in the show, we're going to talk about Calipari, his struggles. But I think part of the reason Calipari is struggling is just that the league has gotten so much better. You can't go. Most teams, again, except maybe Auburn, who may never lose again, most teams aren't going 16-2 in this league anymore. And so this was a great showcase for the league. This was two great teams, and it was an awesome, awesome, awesome game. Alabama needed that win. They get it. Kentucky, I truly believe Kentucky is going to be just fine, despite the fact that they did lose this game. Kentucky at Vandy, the next game, don't sleep on that trip to Vandy. We see what Vandy just did to Tennessee. Then next Saturday, by the way, you think life gets easier in the SEC? How about this, Kentucky? Congrats on those 3 top 20, top 15 teams you just played. Now you got to go to Vandy, who just beat Tennessee. And then after that, you have to go to Tennessee next Saturday night at Thompson-Boling Arena. Alabama actually does get a little bit of a soft spot in their schedule because they have Vanderbilt at home Vanderbilt at home later this week, and then they get LSU at home as well. So it'll be very interesting, very, very, very interesting. By the way, Vandy, you talk about a tough schedule, not ideal setup for them because, again, they have Alabama and Kentucky in the next 2 games. By the way, I think I said that Tennessee game was next Saturday. I apologize. It is actually a week from Tuesday, but don't you worry because we're going to have plenty of coverage of that one. And then, oh, by the way, after that Tennessee game, Arkansas comes to town. I think that'll be a pretty big one as well.